So, this woman Heidi ran the intelligence unit at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Her job was literally tracking hate groups. And the whole time, she was dating a guy embedded inside a neo-Nazi organization called the National Alliance. They shared a house, they shared 2 bank accounts, and she set up a fake company called Tech Writers to pipe donor money directly to him, $1.2 million. The feds say 66% of the cash in their joint account came from people who donated to fight hate. The DOJ just indicted them on federal fraud charges. And to be clear, the SPLC isn't some small outfit. This organization sits on close to $800 million in net assets. According to their most recent IRS filing, they pulled in over $100 million in contributions in a single fiscal year. They've been the go-to source for tracking extremist organizations in the United States for decades. They publish reports, maintain databases, and their hate group designations get cited by journalists, lawmakers, and law enforcement agencies constantly. Donors give them money specifically because they believe it goes toward fighting the kind of groups that Heidi's boyfriend was a part of. 10 years before the indictment dropped, Heidi was running a different life entirely. She joined the SPLC around 1999 as a researcher, working her way up through the organization's ranks. She eventually became the director of the SPLC's Intelligence Project, which is the division responsible for monitoring and reporting on extremist movements across the country. On paper, she was one of the most important people in American hate group tracking. She was quoted in news articles. She spoke at conferences. Her team published the intelligence report, which is used as a reference tool by federal agencies and newsrooms across the country. And at some point during all of this, she started a relationship with a man who was working as an SPLC informant inside the National Alliance, one of the most well-known neo-Nazi organizations in the United States. The National Alliance was founded in the 1970s and at its peak was considered one of the largest and most organized white supremacist groups in the country. It published racist literature, operated a record label for white power music, and recruited openly. The SPLC had been tracking and reporting on the group for years. According to the indictment, this informant is identified as F9. He had infiltrated the National Alliance at the direction of the SPLC, meaning the organization sent him in. His job was to report back on what was happening inside the group, give Heidi's team intelligence on membership, leadership, and activity. And at some point, he rose to become chairman of the National Alliance. So the SPLC's paid informant wasn't just quietly sitting in meetings. He was running the organization, but the relationship between Heidi and F9 went way beyond professional. They were living together, sharing a house and 2 bank accounts. And the line between intelligence work and personal life apparently stopped existing a long time ago. The SPLC was paying F9 for his work as an informant. That part on its own isn't necessarily illegal. Lots of organizations and agencies use paid informants. The problem is how the money moved and where it ended up. According to federal prosecutors, a shell company called Tech Writers was created. It had no real operations, no employees doing tech writing, no product, no service, no clients. It existed as a pass-through to move SPLC donor money to F9 without it looking like what it actually was. Between 2010 and 2023, F9 received over $1.2 million in payments that originated from SPLC donor funds. And between 2015 and 2021, roughly $140,000 of that flowed from the SPLC operating account through the Tech Writers account and landed in joint bank accounts shared by F9 and Heidi. According to the indictment, that money made up about 66% of everything ever deposited into those joint accounts. So 2/3 of the money in their shared bank accounts came from donors who thought they were funding the fight against extremism, and Heidi was using it to pay personal living expenses. I want to sit with that for a second. The people writing checks to the Southern Poverty Law Center thought they were helping track Klansmen, expose neo-Nazis, protect communities from hate violence. And a chunk of that money was going into a joint checking account to cover household expenses for a woman who was secretly living with one of those neo-Nazis. Or at least a guy who had been embedded in a neo-Nazi group and was still receiving payments from the organization while sharing a home and finances with the person who was supposed to be overseeing the whole intelligence operation. The irony is so thick you could choke on it. The director of hate group intelligence was romantically involved with someone inside a hate group, using donor money meant to fight hate groups to fund their shared domestic life. And nobody at the SPLC caught it for years. And Heidi wasn't just doing this quietly in the background. She was publicly one of the most visible faces of anti-extremism work in the country. Journalists called her for quotes. She appeared at panels and forums on domestic extremism. She co-authored reports that got cited in congressional hearings. Her credibility was the SPLC's credibility. And the entire time, according to federal prosecutors, she was running donor money through a fake company to a man she was secretly living with. If you're finding this one interesting, subscribe. I cover stories like this every week. By 2019, Heidi left the SPLC. The circumstances around her departure have been described differently depending on the source, but she moved on. And she didn't disappear from the anti-hate space. She co-founded a new organization in 2020 called the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism. Same field, same work, and the same kind of public profile she'd always had. A new platform to continue tracking and reporting on extremist movements worldwide. She was still getting quoted, still attending conferences, still presenting herself as one of the country's foremost experts on hate groups. And the whole time, the feds were apparently building a case. The original indictment came down in April 2026. The DOJ charged the SPLC itself with 11 counts, including wire fraud, false statements to a federally insured bank, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The total amount the SPLC allegedly funneled through fake accounts to paid informants in extremist groups was about $4.1 million, and F9 wasn't the only one on the payroll. According to prosecutors, the SPLC was paying multiple field sources who were either leading or affiliated with violent extremist organizations that reportedly included people connected to the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist groups. Some of those informants were allegedly involved in recruiting new members for the organizations they were supposed to be monitoring. Others reportedly helped purchase materials for cross burnings and Klan robes and hoods. So SPLC donor money, according to the indictment, was literally funding the operational activities of hate groups. And then on June 2nd, 2026, the DOJ filed a superseding indictment. Same charges and same defendants, but with more detail. More specifics about how the money moved, who approved it, and what the relationships looked like behind the scenes. That superseding indictment is where the details about Heidi and F9's living situation, their joint bank accounts, and the 66% figure all came from. The indictment uses the term Employee 2 to refer to the intelligence project director. It doesn't name Heidi directly. But multiple news outlets have identified Employee 2 as Heidi based on the description in the filing, the timeline, and the role outlined. She has not been personally charged with a crime as of right now. The indictment is against the SPLC as an organization, but the details paint a very specific picture of who was involved and how. And the SPLC's response has been aggressive. The organization filed a motion to dismiss in late May, arguing the prosecution is politically motivated and retaliatory. They pointed out that the current DOJ leadership has publicly clashed with the SPLC over its hate group designations. Their legal team also alleged that the DOJ shared an unsigned copy of the superseding indictment with journalists before it was officially filed, which led them to ask the judge to sanction the DOJ for the leak. So the SPLC isn't going quietly on this one. They're fighting it on multiple fronts, in the courtroom and in the press. So that's where things stand. The SPLC is facing trial. Heidi has been publicly identified in the indictment by role, even if not by name. The organization that built its entire brand on exposing hate is now accused of secretly funding the people it claimed to oppose. And a woman who spent 20 years as one of the most trusted voices in anti-extremism research was allegedly sharing a home and bank accounts with a man she was supposed to be monitoring from the other side of the ideological fence. You spend decades telling the public you're the last line of defense against hate groups. You collect hundreds of millions of dollars in donations to do it. You publish the lists and name the names. You build the databases that everyone cites. And then it turns out the person running your intelligence division was living with someone from one of those groups and using donor money to split the rent. Not a contractor they kept at arm's length, but a romantic partner under the same roof, sharing everything. The case is ongoing. Nobody has been convicted. The SPLC says the charges are politically driven. Heidi hasn't been personally indicted. All of that is true, but the superseding indictment doesn't read like a political hit job. It reads like an accounting trail. Shell companies, bank records, deposit percentages, payment timelines. The kind of evidence that either holds up in court or doesn't. And if it holds up, then the organization that made its name by following the money was undone by people who forgot that someone might eventually follow theirs. More stories like this on the channel.